Greetings, fellow Kerbonauts. Rhadamant here. Thank you for tuning in to Kerbal Space Program 2, Episode 2, Achieving an Orbit. So there's something weird about those launch arms where they're a little sticky, so I don't have a perfectly vertical flight immediately. And as a result, this is what tumbling looks like, which is obviously an unwanted. It's survivable in this case, but unwanted. One of the things that I cannot do is with these solid boosters, I can't shut them down. So if we wanted to fix this, if we wanted to survive this, we could just decouple that, point prograde, kill all of our horizontal velocity so that we're not ridiculously out of control. Decouple the bottom, hit the parachute, and this would be like a flight abort, where obviously things went awry, but I aborted the flight, I decoupled all the parts, and I would float down to the surface and survive. Because in a career mode, your Kerbals are finite, they can die. It depends on your settings, but typically they're finite and they can die. So it's good that even when things go wrong, you can still abort the missions and keep your Kerbals alive. Hey, buddy. So in order to fix this, I think it's going to be really simple. I can do one of two things, or maybe both. One is to get rid of those launch arms, or to put them on a separate stage so that the launch arms drop me first. So let's try that. So put all the launch arms on a stage right below the rockets so that I can release and then fire up the rockets. And that delay might help. And then the other thing I could do is control wings. So I can add a, like stabilizers to this rocket. Those are kind of big. Well, those are all big. Let's do extra small stabilizers. So then we have tiny little stabilizers to help keep us from pointing in the wrong direction. So this would be the Mark III. And don't worry, once I finish showing you how to troubleshoot rockets, I'm going to be building better, more robust rockets. This is just for the sake of new players. No, we're still listing. So one of the reasons why we're flipping like this is our center of thrust and center of weight are off. Because I removed the large fuel, I changed the center of mass, and then I also inched up the solid boosters, changing the center of thrust. So when your center of thrust is over your center of weight, you can end up tumbling like that. So I'll show you how to see these things. So here's the center of thrust, and here's the center of mass. And what I'm going to want to do to make this a little bit more stable is just to lower this even further. Like that. And then let's see if the swivel, I believe, gimbals, which is that the engine can change its position in order to change its direction of thrust. Yeah. It's a full 3 degrees of thrust vectoring. Okay. I'm not even going to rename this from Mark III to Mark IV. Monkeyplex, thank you for the resub. And for adding stream time. Wow, this thing really just wants to tumble. Alright, I'm gonna scratch this whole design because it's, I'll just go with the original fuel tank. Or, alternatively, I can slap in a, the same small fuel tank, but just double it up. And that way I don't even really have to change much. Silly little tumbler. Oh, no, this is glued to the wrong part. So this pretty much looks like the original rocket. And then another thing they could do is add additional wing stability so that it's not going crazy. And the wings here, whoa, no, not those. The wings here are like sort of procedurally generated, so there's going to be a lot fewer wings than what you're used to. But it's because it can be modified, you know, through the parts manager. Alright, Guero 4, you're looking far more stable. I don't even have to touch it. So the other thing to note is you want to keep track of your delta V. Delta V is the change of velocity that your craft is capable of. And there's a certain amount of delta V required to break atmo. There's a certain amount of delta V required to do a moon transfer or an orbit, so on and so forth. So your delta V is what's really important to control. Our ApoApps is already in the into space here. So I'm going to cut the rockets even though I have more fuel, because I don't need the fuel. And I'll time accelerate until we dip into space. And this will be the first suborbital ballistic launch that our fake career mode has achieved. For my next trick, let's try to land back at Kerbal Space Center as close as we can. So one thing to consider is that Kerbin is orbiting or rotating, right? So the collision point here actually might be far closer to the Kerbal Space Center than you consider, because the planet is rotating underneath us as we're coming back down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to time accelerate and then use the engines to sort of adjust. So actually, if we take a look at it again, we're going to overshoot it a little bit, I think. So I'm going to point east and fire up a little bit to try to encourage us to parachute back into the Kerbal Space Center. So I think that might have been enough thrust. A little bit more. I'm just eyeballing it. Okay, now we're approaching Kerbin, so I'm going to want to point retrograde so that the parachute doesn't deploy upside down. Oh, we're tumbling now. And let's slow down time acceleration as we approach the ground, like a very, very violent lawn dart. I'm going to stack separate. Bye-bye. Oh, I am definitely going to be landing at Kerbal Space Center. Yeah, very illegal lawn dart. Our heat shield didn't really have to do very much because we didn't have a lot of velocity. Now, in the career mode, you can also destroy your Kerbal Space Center buildings, which then requires funds to be able to repair it. I'm pretty sure I hit my parachute to deploy. But then you also get refunded money for... there we go. You get refunded money for landing close to Kerbal Space Center. So you want to land as close as you can, but like not directly onto a building where you might damage it and then have to pay for it. And there we go. First launch works, and I think this is the admin building, or because that would be the tracking center, and then that would be the vehicle assembly. No, this might be part of the vehicle assembly building, but it looks like the admin building. So I'm going to go with its admin. So we're basically parachuting down at the admin building and like maybe landing in a tree. Pretty accurate, I would say. I mean, pretty good. Thunk. Awesome. Is there a way for me to shut page up? I forget. Okay, I do want temperature gauges. Yeah, it's fine. Page can keep bothering me. So normally when you land, you would do a flight recovery and recover your craft to refund the parts that survived re-entry. And this is what the recovery kind of would look like. Again, in career mode, you'd be refunded money for the parts that you saved. So, cool. Let's go to the vehicle assembly building. The giant ball is a telescope. Oh, that's good to know. So this next rocket is going to be an orbiter, where we are going to establish a equatorial low orbit around Kerbin. So what I mean by that is we're gonna, and then we're gonna purposely do a re-entry. So it's also gonna have a re-entry phase. We're not gonna leave the Kerbal up there forever. Raffle timer for the name of the craft. So let's build a little orbiter. Now orbiters typically, to oversimplify it, will have 2 stages. We'll have a braking atmosphere stage, the escape velocity stage, basically a lot of thrust to get you through the soupy atmosphere. And then once you are on a like a ballistic trajectory out into space, you're also going on a phase that burns efficiently, but with enough thrust to properly create a stable orbit around Kerbin. So we're going to start with the tin can again. Simple tin can design. I'm definitely going to want to make it so that the Kerbal that is in here can EVA. In a career mode, it is important to be able to leave your craft for science reasons. I will add a larger fuel tank, but not a large fuel tank, just a larger, small fuel tank. And then in terms of the engine, I'm going to do a swivel again. Now, one thing to note is there is the concept of fuel efficiency in the game. So if we take a look at the engines here, each engine will have an ISP in 1 atmo rating and an ISP in vacuum rating. So if we take a look at these two, for instance, this Ant is horribly inefficient at atmosphere burning, but is far more efficient at vacuum burning, but it also doesn't provide a lot of thrust. This is one of the ways to sort of analyze. So for instance, if we wanted a high efficiency atmo, that would be like the CR7 Rapier, because this is sort of a jet engine. It doesn't require oxidizer because it uses air from the atmosphere. And then if we wanted something efficient in space, that would be the ISP VAC. So this Poodle engine has 340 in VAC, 315, 305, 290, 298, so on and so forth. So like the Labradoodle has a 343 in VAC with a lot of thrust. So as long as you can offset the weight of the engine itself, this is a pretty good orbital engine for space. But I digress. So if we want to survive re-entry, let's go ahead with yet another thermal shield underneath and a parachute on top. I'm not so concerned with trying to preserve the entire craft for cost, you know, because that's not something that exists in the game yet. But if this was true career mode, that would be a real consideration of mine. So we'll pick just this swivel engine again. And this alone gives us about 2.4k delta V, which is far enough to create an orbit and then also to deorbit and return back to Kerbin. So what I'm going to do here is set up the solid boosters, because they're very cost efficient. They're harder to control, of course, but they're very cost efficient. to bring us to space. So these are the thumpers. And then the thumper phase plus the liquid fuel phase is 4.6K delta V. If you're wondering, KSP delta V calculator, if you Google that, it will show you, there's a lot of like online tools to be able to calculate for Kerbal Space Program the delta V required for certain things. So if you want to create like a stable orbit in Kerbal Space Program, there's a certain amount of delta V that will be required, plus a thrust to weight ratio of greater than 1. Because if it's less than 1, you're not even going to leave. So let's... Yoda, stop. So the delta V from the surface of Kerbin to low orbit or stationary orbit of Kerbin is going to be probably easy to achieve in this. Dude, come on, man. He's barking up a storm. And the name of this craft, this orbiter, is going to be the Marauder. That's a menacing name. Marauder Mark 1. All right, let's add also some aerodynamics to this. I'm going to add a larger fuel tank to it as well, or a longer fuel tank to match the size of the kickbacks. Cool. Delta V's gone up a little bit because I added more fuel. Then the other thing I'm going to want to do... Oh, you know what? We can add fuel tanks. Well, no, those are liquid fuel, not solid boost. Never mind. I take that back. Put that away. Put the aerodynamics back. Where is the cones? Oh, I collapsed it. All right. And then I'm going to do the control surfaces or stabilizers on the boosters so that we don't have to pay for the weight of the boosters. This thing, it looks very basic, but it has all the components needed, I believe, to become an orbiter. So that's good. In the engineering report, it has a thrust-to-weight ratio of 2.4. So a thrust-to-weight ratio of 1 means you create enough thrust to counter gravity, but that's it. You basically don't go up if you have a craft of a 1.0. If you have a thrust-to-weight ratio of like 1.3 or so, you will slowly accelerate. Typically, what's really useful is to have a high thrust-to-weight ratio when you're trying to break atmo, so you can get through the atmosphere quickly. But then once you're in space, you don't need a high thrust-to-weight ratio necessarily, unless you're trying to do really tight-timed maneuvers. Like, for instance, if you're trying to capture an asteroid and then slow it down, you're going to need a really ridiculously high thrust-to-weight ratio, because once you grab that asteroid, your weight's going to go up, but your thrust won't go up. So these are things to consider later on. But, all right, let's also add a few struts for stability. We already have stabilizer wings. Good enough. So, Marauder, do we think we're going to be an orbiter? I don't know, but we'll see. Let's launch. So for this launch, I'm going to want to start to do a gravity turn. Ideally, pretty early on, but at the latest, I'm going to want to do a gravity turn around 10 kilometers up. And this current phase is not using liquid fuel at all. I'm just using solid boosters. Is the staging right? Yeah, the staging's right. What are my thoughts on the game? The game pretty much includes all the things they promised at early access release. I think a lot of the reviews of the game expected it to have a lot more than what they promised, which is unreasonable. So my opinion is it's a very solid early access title, but it obviously is not going to include all the things that the original had because it's an early access release. All right, so my gravity turn is pretty pathetic because I don't have a thrust vectoring engine on. But that's fine, because we can start to do that now. Oh! And I must have hit spacebar multiple times because my parachute and stack separator have all decoupled. So I'm going to revert to launch. I don't think I actually need to make any changes. I don't know why it went through all of the stages all at once, because the staging was correct as far as I can tell. Take a look at it. So what I will say about the game is there's some things that are a little clunkier. I was mentioning this earlier, that maneuvers seem to be a little less accurate than the original Kerbal Space Program. Some of the tutorials are sort of clunkier as well. But there are no tutorials in the original game, so it's a net benefit in my opinion. And then some things like staging, like you just saw just now, it could just be user error, it could just be me, but I find me making mistakes that I wouldn't make in the original game more often in this one. Alright, so as you can see, I'm really early gravity turning instead. Just tilting towards the east to use the rotation of Kerbin to assist me. And it needs a career mode. Yeah, I mean, again, these are things that were already told to the community that wouldn't be in the initial release. I feel like a lot of people had a fictional idea of what would be included, and then got upset because things that were never promised weren't there, which makes no sense to me. I'm not trying to defend Private Division or Kerbal Space Program. I'm just trying to be more realistic of like, well, they never promised career mode at release, so why expect it? That's not reasonable at all. Okay. My Apple Apps is already actually in space. It's above 70K, so I'm not even going to do any burning here. So what I'm going to do in order to create an orbit, a stable orbit, you can see the debris, the ballistic trajectory of the debris. It's going to the ocean. I'm going to create a maneuver plan at the Apple Apps and drag prograde until we have an orbit. And I'm going to do it as pretty much as low as we can. So what's important is that the periapse is also in orbit. So the periapse has to be above 70K. Which I don't think it is, but I can course correct if it isn't. There we go. I think that's probably above 70K. And this maneuver requires 1600 delta V. I have 2800 delta V in the engine. And then I want to start my burn in 1 minute 23 seconds. So at this point, in the SAS control down here, I can click this, which is point to maneuver. And then Bob Kerman, the pilot, will point to where my maneuver burn will be. And then I just wait for 1 minute until the maneuver node. Or alternatively, I can click this warp to maneuver, which I will do. And it's pretty good about automatically warping to maneuver and not overshooting it. Yeah, the exhaust plume does expand as you climb into thinner atmospheres. It's really cool. So here you'll see yellow, 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 green means go. There's the exhaust plume. It's a lot wider in low atmo than it would be in high atmo. And we are burning for 50 seconds. So you'll see the collision line eventually circle out. And actually, this is a larger burn than I mean to. That apoapse is way higher than it needs to be. So I'm gonna sort of follow the burn timer in the maneuver, but then ignore it once I have stable orbit. Once the periapse basically is not negative, but positive 70K plus. That's what we're aiming for. Let's trash that maneuver. This is what I'm saying, is sometimes the maneuvers are just weird. And I think in that case it was just weird. The maneuver told me that I was like flying off into the moon, and it's like, no, I'm not. All right, periapse is 50, 60. Okay, there we go. We are in orbit. We're in a stable orbit. It's not a perfectly elliptical orbit. It goes from 92K at the apoapse to 74K at the periapse, but we will never fall back to Kerbin. If your periapse is lower than 70K, you dip into the atmosphere, and eventually, depending on how far you dip into the atmosphere, it will create drag, and the drag will bring you back down. But anything above 70K is stable as far as Kerbal Space Program is concerned. So, we are in a stable orbit, and pretending that we're in career mode, let's go ahead and do an EVA. So, I'm going to let go. I'm going to hit R and jetpack around. Yeah, Space Boy! All right, let's grab it and board it. And then I'm going to try to land as close to Kerbal Space Center as possible. So I'm going to click on this. So this is currently my orbit. I'm going to click here and just like warp to point, which will time accelerate us to a point where we can purposely deorbit. Because I'm not leaving Bob Kermit up here forever. Warp a little bit further. And we'll see how close I can get to Kerbal Space Center. All right, let's stop warping here. So then I'll create a little maneuver plan for my deorbiter where we prograde burn until we enter Atmo, like that. So let's point to maneuver and start re-entry. So this path has us aero braking roughly over Kerbal Space Center. So as you can see, this is our entry path. And what I'm hoping is that we start aero braking around here. I might actually need to fire prograde to slow us down even more. So we'll see. And I will quick save. Not that I'm worried about anything. All right, let's time accelerate. Oh yeah, I'm going to need to prograde burn if I want to stop on Kerbal Space Center. So let's do that. We'll prograde burn. I don't have a ton of fuel left, but enough that, you know, I can afford this burn. Because the Space Center is right there, you can see, on the horizon. Accelerate time a little bit and have us come on down. All right, one more prograde, or retrograde burn rather. So I'm still pretty high up and we're still moving over it pretty quick. Also, it lets me use up the last of the fuel, which is gone now. So separate that stack. Bye-bye, engine. You served me well. And now it's just up to gravity and aerodynamics to stop us. Sorry about all the game paused on pause spam. That's the way the game is. So we're going to land just off the coast. Actually, I might land pretty close to the airstrip, too. We'll see. But this is where the heat shields come in handy, because we're coming down pretty hot, pretty fast. Although these heat shields don't seem to be getting all that hot yet. Hi, Kerbal Space Center. You look pretty from down up here. Trigger the parachute, which will deploy at 1,000 meters. Oh, there it goes. Thunk. And I'm, what, 10 kilometers off the coast or so? Not terrible. All right, let's have our first splashdown. So I've just changed the altimeter to be over sea level rather than ground level, because sea level is way more relevant when we're splashing in the ocean. Because if I pause it for a second, you can see ground level is 361 meters up, but sea level, it's only 17 meters. So I'm basically 17 meters from the water. And ocean. Whoop. I should have hooked up lights so they could find me. But there we go. Let's recover the vessel. Done, and go to the vehicle assembly building. So, first orbit has been achieved. And with style, landing pretty close back to Kerbal Space Center. Next mission here is going to be launch communication satellites. Raffle timer's down. There it is. So, the reason for a communication satellite is if you have your command pods as probes, your probes need to be able to communicate with Kerbal Space Center through, usually what you want to do is to put in satellites around Kerbin, the planet. So the next mission is going to be to put in, I'm not going to make it geosynchronous satellites, you know, like GPS satellites. I don't think we need to go that far. But what I will do is I will have a payload of, yeah, and I'll probably put them in like a pseudo-polar orbit, which would be GIS satellites would be in a pseudo-polar orbit, but it's not that important. What's important, which will make this mission a little bit different, is it's going to be a manned mission, but also have a payload. That's what I'll attempt. So a manned mission means still a tin can mission, but with a payload of satellites. So the reentry is going to look the same as all the others, and I could have grouped this up into a grouping to be able to import it, but I don't mind building it over again, because that helps people that are just tuning in see, oh, this is how I do that. So here's our little reentry vessel. Good enough. Then we're going to want a stacked decoupler, and then I'm going to want payload. So payloads allow you to store stuff for launch in them. And it might require me to do some multiple iterations here because I haven't done a lot of payloading in the game. But we can also do... Oh, are they all medium plus? Okay. So let's attempt to launch 2 satellites. That's what we'll go for. a little redundancy. So in this fairing, I have radial decouplers, and this fairing actually might not be big enough. So let's have a bigger fairing, just because I think it's going to be required. So we're going to have a small stack decoupler, and then in structures, oh, this is an adjustable tube. Yeah, there's a lot of new parts that I'm not necessarily familiar with. Nope, that's air intakes. What am I looking for here? Panels, hubs, trusses. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool sort of parts that we'll get into. Trussing resizers. Is this small to medium? Yeah. Oh, that looks cool. But I think for this section, what I could do is a small to medium fuel tank, because this will be a fueled section anyway. So small to medium fuel tank. And then underneath the medium fuel tank, I'll put in the fairings. So a medium fairing holding... Oh, that's like a cargo bay. That's pretty cool. Maybe we'll put them in a cargo bay instead of a fairing. I like the look of it. So that's where the payload goes. We'll put some beams in there. If I can get this glued. Come on. Stick to the glue. Yep, there it is. Alright, there we go. So the only thing I will say about this is because it opens to one side, symmetry is a little bit harder to deal with. Slightly. So this will probably require a little bit of testing. But that's fine. Alright, and the name of this one is going to be the Webster. Cool. So for a satellite, or for a communications probe, let's talk about what's important. So we're going to want a probe core, so that it can actually talk to, you know, for remote guidance. So we're going to want one of these little probe cores. We'll put them aside. We're also going to want batteries and solar power, and probably some really small but really efficient adjustment, you know, engines. These all are going to be required. So let's do the... Let's pick out the engine. I'll give it maybe a little spark engine. And then we'll pick out a fuel tank. So like an extra small... I think this is only monopropellant. So 2 little monopropellant. I'll probably give it a... Can these fit? No, they can't fit. Okay, so it's going to be like these little tiny fuel tanks. But I'll double them up so that there's a little bit more fuel. Invalid symmetry. Yeah, you don't say. There we go. So we have a little bit more fuel. Stick these spark engines down below. The probe core on top. And then, like I said, we're also going to want power storage for when the probe is in the shadow of Kerbin and doesn't have direct sun access. So let's get a little battery and a mounted solar panel. I'm trying to figure out which one will fit. Maybe these, but double them up. It kind of, my only worry is it kind of clips into the fairings. At least the back one does. So that would be my only worry. Maybe I'll have it angled. Like that. Alright, the decoupler force here, I am going to want to reduce. The reason being is that I don't want this radial decoupler to launch the satellite into the edge with a lot of force. Just gently release it is fine. Oh, the decouplers aren't angled in the main structure. Yeah. Good call. There we go. The decoupler's even. Now I just need to adjust these solar panels. Perfect. And then the last part would be actually communications, right? Because there's no point in having a communication satellite that doesn't communicate. So let's add those as well. This says it's small. Oh yeah, it is small. Try to snap it onto the top. I'm bad at snapping, as you can see. There. And then when this is expanded, it looks like that. Very nice. So this here, let's see. Should work. Anything else that I need to add to this? So these fuel tanks have methane and oxidizer. Okay. Methane and oxidizer. So the only concern is, what does this burn? Because I don't want a spark engine that burns the wrong fuel, right? But this all can be resolved in testing. Isn't one fuel enough? Maybe. But that's not how I'm designing it. Alright. Closing the cargo bay. Looks like it fits. Looks like there's actually an unnecessary amount of empty space there. But, you know, that's fine. Then all we really need to do is get this thing into orbit. So I'm going to stick just a medium tank at the bottom of this. Put some sort of orbiter high efficiency and vacuum engine on it. So that would be like a poodle. So the delta V here is about 4K. And this is going to be a more expensive mission, obviously. Let's give it the Webster MK1. I'll save it. All right. And then radial launch solid boosters. So I'm going to have the extended radial decouplers here. There's other things that I actually probably want to add. So right from this stage here, I'm going to have stability. I'm going to have a reaction wheel, because this is a clunkier construction and probably will require reaction wheels. And then in the engines, we'll stick the Clydesdale solid boosters. Big honkers. I have plenty of delta V, ridiculous amount of delta V. Let's add some aerodynamics to the top, and because this is sandbox, I don't really need to worry too badly about the cost of the missions here. So I'm going to connect the Clydesdales to each other for stability, and then add control wings. And then also connect it to the center section as well. Ugly, but functional. All right, let's go with the wings too. So we'll do... No, I don't need those kind of, these kind of medium wings. And then stabilizers up top. So the intention is to put these two satellites into slightly different orbits, and that's why this center section has just so much delta V. So let's see if this works. It might not. It might be imperfect, but we'll tweak it. So at this point, I want to adjust this staging to make sure it makes sense. I can combine those two stages. I don't want the satellite engines firing up before the decoupler. That doesn't make any sense. And that looks about right. Are both probes going to be launched at the same time? Let's go with no. How do you separate them out again? Let's open that up. Well, you know what? I can actually just right-click to couple. So I'll do that instead. That'll be easier than trying to fix it right now. So what just happened where our... Oh, okay. I see the difference in delta V. Okay. It's because it's calculating the probe cores. Okay. So let's go for it. I'm going to save it again. And launch. Thank you for tuning in to Kerbal Space Program 2, which originally streamed live on Twitch, February 25th. If you have any feedback or questions for me, let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to catch a live stream of mine, Rhadamant.com has my stream schedule and countdown timers to upcoming streams. If you'd like to join my gaming community, Rhadamant.com also has a link to Discord, as does the description of this video. Thank you so very much for watching. A special thank you to my Patreon patrons, Twitch subscribers, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode or an upcoming stream of mine. Farewell, my fellow Kerbonauts.